it's okay to ask for help. No one is, better than another person. I think that there still is stigma. It's a human right. Seeking help is a human right, and that's how we should all see it. We shouldn't judge. And I will advocate until I'm blue in the face as far as not having that stigma for seeking help. It's just like anything else. If you seek help when you're physically sick, right? Why wouldn't you seek help with your mental?
Welcome to the LHP podcast, and today we have another special guest. I'm Marcelo, and we try to bring you a diversity when it comes to mental health and being able to talk about subjects, having to keep the family together, and making sure that we're able to access services that are available to the El Paso community. And today's guest is a very distinguished guest. She has a lot of experience in the mental health field, and I want to be able to give her the credit that she deserves, and I want to read a little bit from her bio, but at the same time, what I would like for her to do is to give us a little more insights about her personal career and how she ventured into the mental health field right now as soon as I finish introducing her. She is Mary Lou Morales. She's a distinguished mental health advocate with over 2 decades of dedicated experience in the field of behavioral health. Her extensive journey in this realm has been marked by profound education, leadership, and tireless commitment to improving mental health services. What I see here, this is the part that I was very impressed with. Mary Lou's involvement in behavioral health service startups showcases her entrepreneurial spirit and innovative thinking. Her work with Independent Physicians Association and large group practices has enabled her to develop and manage behavioral health programs integrated into service sites, fostering a holistic approach to patient care. This approach not only maximizes patient outcomes, but also significantly reduces the long-term cost of care. Why did I read that part? Because a lot of people sometimes need to see that there's an end to this. It's not just, you're going to get services for mental health and it's going to be an ongoing thing. You can give it closure, and you got to find strategic ways to actually be able to do that. So without further ado, our guest today is Mary Lou Morales. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me, Marcelo.
Thank you for being here today, because I know you're extremely busy. You've been highly recommended by a lot of mental health professionals out there that I've met. It's like, hey, you should have Mary Lou on the show. And I'm like, okay, cool. How do I get a hold of her? Well, I got her phone number. Let me go ahead and hook you up, right? And that's how I ended up getting a hold of you. But they speak wonders of you and the things that you've done in the El Paso community. And I think what you're doing is valuable. I think it's awesome. And I think that that the projects that you have right now ongoing and future projects that we talked about are going to be definitely something that's going to be very, very valuable to the El Paso community. So how'd you get started with mental health, Mary Lou?
So I got started in mental health really out of necessity. I was a very young teen mom, and just circumstances happened in my life where I needed to work. At that time, I was a stay-at-home mom, so I needed to work. An opportunity had come up where I got to work at an inpatient hospital here locally, and I didn't really know anything, as to behavioral health or what I was getting myself into, to be quite honest. But all I knew is that I needed a job, right? So I went to work at this facility, and I would not change it for the world. And by that I mean is that even from the get-go, from the onboarding process at this place actually had implemented was just amazing because of the situation I was going through at the time. Their approaches as to the onboarding process, again, it really makes you understand and comprehend what the patients, right, at the facility were experiencing. So they wanted to make sure that, if we did outings with the patients, that we knew exactly like what it felt to be on the other side, right? So, I mean, I am so blessed that I got to meet the people that I did. And, I experienced sweat lodges, which I had never done that before. It's very spiritual. And it was something that I needed at the time, right? I mean, I jumped off a cliff in Waco tanks. I mean, it's just, it really pushes you. That experience really pushed me to really feel, what I needed to feel personally, but also to be able to be a mental health advocate for those that were seeking services. So that's how I started, but I knew that I wasn't going to end, or, that was going to be it. I actually had started off as a unit clerk at the facility, and little by little, I just wanted to learn more and started advancing in my career. I then continued school.
That's what I wanted to get into. I mean, the subject today that I really want to focus on is grief. I want to be able to see if you can give us some pointers on helping people who have lost a loved one, because I think that a lot of people have gone through something so difficult and they need so much help. And sometimes they don't know where to turn or what to do when a loved one passes away. So I'm sure that there's stages of grief also that I would like for you to kind of touch upon, and any experience that you might be able to share with us. But yes, before we actually get into that, I think it'd be great if you could tell us a little bit about your schooling and what classes you decided to take and all that, and credentials and all that. Prior to getting after getting into the field.
Well, initially, I mean, I had wanted to be a nurse, right? But then, of course, life happens, and there was no way I could go to school, during the day. I had to work. So what I did is that I had enrolled at Park University, and I went for my bachelor's in social psychology. And I mean, just as I was going through classes, and, it just really intrigued me and continued to want me to grow in behavioral health, right? After that, I got my master's in health administration because I did want to be in some type of leadership role. And as the years went by, I then went into social work. So I have a master's in social work as well.
Oh, cool.
Yes. So that's my schooling. But on the topic of grief, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be grief of, the death of a loved one, or, it could be grief when it pertains to anything in your life, the loss of maybe a friendship, the loss of maybe, just circumstances, that change in your life that you didn't expect that to happen, right? So grief in general, I mean, I think it's a very broad statement.
Yes.
We see grief, or we hear about grief more, of course, around death. But there are stages of grief, right? So there's the stage of denial, right? Like, how could this have happened, to me? And again, it could be involving death, or it can be involving any situation, right, that has ended.
Yeah. That's it, the Kubler-Ross thing, right?
Yes.
It is 4 or 5 stages of grief,
It's
I think.
5.
Yeah.
So that's step 1 is denial, right? Step 2 is the second stage is anger, and it's like, why could this have happened to me? Why did this have to happen? The third stage is bargaining, right? So it's sometimes it takes you thinking, like, if you ask God, why them, not me? Like, take me, let this person be in my life, or be alive, stay alive. Why, you tend to bargain, whether it's with, God, or just whatever higher power you believe in.
And that was interesting how you said that it doesn't necessarily have to do with death either. It could be with an illness also. Why did this have to happen to this person here? How come it couldn't happen with me on the bargaining stage, right?
Yeah, or it could even be a divorce, right? It could be anything. Anything that is a loss is you can grieve over. The next stage is depression. That's when depression and sadness comes in, right? So it's, you just, and again, keep in mind that these stages are not linear. Like, it doesn't have to go from one to the other to the other. Like, it's not robotic, right?
Yeah. It's not a sequence.
No, it isn't. And then the last step is, or stage is acceptance. So it's just really, again, it not being linear. So it can be months that have passed, and all of a sudden it hits you again, right? Or maybe you weren't able to process someone's death appropriately. And by that I mean is that, you hear a lot of, well, be strong, be the strong one for your family, or, your family looks up to you. And, just that alone is a lot of pressure for someone.
That's a whole lot of pressure.
It is.
And it's a very hard thing to actually manage. But I remember when I was working as a health educator at the University Medical Center, I had a group of teenagers that I would provide education to. And this education went from, teen pregnancy to self-esteem, things of that nature. It was a very intense program. And during the middle of the program, it lasted about maybe 3 months. One of the kids lost a family member, a little brother. And the transformation that I saw in his behavior and his family and the wife and husband trying to put the pieces back together. The student that we had, him trying to keep composure, that was something difficult. And that's when I myself wanted to see if I can gather some tools and be like, well, what do I do? How do I help this little guy out? Because, it breaks your heart. You see their faces, you see the tears coming out for they're trying to listen and trying to distract their mind in what we're doing as far as the lesson plan. But then you could see it in his face that he just couldn't take it. And that was hard. So I guess I was left with wanting more tools to help somebody. What kind of tools in your experience when you provided therapy, you would talk to patients and kind of give them that?
Well, it all really goes down to, assessing the situation, because it's not a cookie cutting type of scenario, right? So everybody's situation is particular to them. So it really is assessing the client and making sure that you have an individualized treatment plan or individualized care plan for that person, and making sure that together you work on what are appropriate coping skills, right? For whatever it is that's triggering them in whatever situation. So a lot does go into it, because you do have to get to know that person, a little deeper on another level, to be able to help them help themselves. Because at the end of the day, you can talk about coping skills, you can talk about, tools, but you're not going to be there forever, right? As a mental health professional. So you need to help them teach themselves, right? These tools, and make sure that they carry that with them. So when they do feel a certain type of way, or you're dealing with, these feelings, that they remember and reflect on what they were taught or
Mm-hmm.
what they worked on together with their provider, right?
Well, I think that's really cool. And as a clinician, for our little handbag of tools, it's always good to gather as much information and build rapport. What about those that are not in the field? What about those who are, let's go ahead and say, maybe just a friend or maybe just an instructor or teacher, and they don't have those tools? What kind of basic tools can we get them to start off to be able to open up a conversation or just be present? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Um, I think that in those situations, it really is listening, right? It's really listening to the person that's dealing with whatever it is that they're dealing with. I mean, believe it or not, I mean, even in therapy, that's a big thing, is hearing them out, and because that's what it is. It's the individual helping themselves as far as how to manage their feelings. And yes, you can provide tools, you can provide worksheets, you can provide all
Mm-hmm.
these different journaling suggestions. But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, like, if it's somebody that's not familiarized, being able to also reach out, do their own research sometimes, that's what it
Mm-hmm.
takes, because nowadays, and I'm so grateful that mental health is spoken about to the extent that it is, and it
Mm-hmm.
continues to, right? Because you and I know, I mean, back in the day, that just wasn't something openly
Mm-hmm.
spoken about. And it was either like, hush hush, or, families not wanting to know that something was wrong with their child or a family member. So it's really just making sure that us as mental health providers educate and
Mm-hmm.
continue to educate to different entities or different people. It's not just the fact of, having this knowledge, and but being able to participate in, I don't know, like health fairs, or just um, uh, like community college, for example, like
Mm-hmm.
having to be able to present to individuals that don't know much about mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping them informed, right? So it's
Yeah.
being able to, maybe partner up with NAMI,
Mm-hmm.
and and they offer so many classes that, it's amazing, the support that is really out there. And I think for me, it's making yourself aware, and the education component of it.
Yeah, definitely. So they do have organizations out there that do provide education and workshops for those that actually need the tools. I know that Emergence has the mental health, or what is it, the first aid kit training that they have. And it's pretty much open to the El Paso community. I think anybody can take the workshop, if I'm not mistaken. And they offer really good tools on how to help people that are in distress, right? And when somebody, going back to grief, when somebody loses or somebody gets divorced, what are some of the symptomologies that you see mostly with somebody who goes into the clinic and is seeking therapy with you?
I mean, I think, again, you see the different stages,
Mm-hmm.
right? And um, at different times. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily, they can go in saying, I'm feeling depressed, and maybe not necessarily thinking that the trigger is the death of a loved one, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
just feeling this way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, once you start getting to assess the patient or getting to know them, is when you start finding out that, what, they just lost someone.
Mm-hmm.
And, then it puts a lot of things in perspective as to, like, um, how to be able to help, or how to be able to support and give these tools to an individual, right? I can tell you that um, I lost my mom at a very young age. She was very young, and I was very young,
Mm-hmm.
also. I was, I believe I was 24. And at that
Mm-hmm.
time, I was pregnant with my son, who is now 17. And because it was an unexpected death, the way I coped with that, right, was very, I felt like I had to be the strong one because I had a high risk pregnancy and I didn't want to do anything to hurt myself. So I could not allow myself at that time, I felt like, to grieve, right? So, I mean, even up to
How
now,
hard was that though? How hard was
that was super hard. That was like, you know, I have 3 other sisters and we all, you know, love my mom dearly and we all had our own relationships with her. But it's just when you don't expect it or see it coming, you're, you know, the stages of grief, it's very true. I mean, I experienced it, right? And it didn't happen at the moment. It didn't happen right away. It happened throughout the years, you know, and that really did affect me a lot. And I'm telling you this because I just recently lost my father, and my father was 73 years old. And, you know, we were, I don't want to say more prepared, but we saw it coming, right? And I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I did have in working with hospice just recently, because we were able to put my father in hospice services. And a lot of people, even when you hear the word hospice, right, they think,
it's a scary word.
Yeah, they think that's it, they're dying, right? And granted, my father received additional support, like services that, you know, that people really don't know that are out there. And the definition of what hospice really is additional support. And I am very grateful because not only did I get to work there, but I also was able to see, you know, him happy because volunteers went to go visit him, right? Or just the different nurses that would go and see him. Just being heard, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I mean, at the end, it just it was a sad situation, and you know, and he ended up passing. But that grief was different.
Did you feel the pressure as well? You mentioned you had 3 sisters also. Are you the oldest sister?
I'm not. I'm one of the middle sisters, right? But when it comes down to working in behavioral health, or, you know, when I was working in hospice, right? That was pressure for me because I felt like my sisters did seek me out in the sense of being able to, you know, oh, well, you know, people in the community, right?
Yeah.
Like, what can we do? And luckily that did help me, right? In different situations, because my father also did struggle with mental illness. So I was able to get him the help that he needed during those times, you know, that he needed it. And speaking to him, you know, not as his daughter, but speaking to him also as a mental health professional, right? And trying to work with him as to getting him through situations, right?
Yeah.
So it has really been a blessing, to be quite honest. The experiences that I've had and the people that I've worked with and the connections that I've made. You know, my sisters tell me, you've been at the right place at the right time. And that I will take with me, like, you know, for forever, because it's really true. It's been true. And, you know, I mean, I don't want to call it coincidence.
Yeah.
You know, I want to call it more of, it's just, you know, I don't know.
It was aligned. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It really aligned.
So, thank you for sharing that story. I know it could be a little difficult to share things like that. What if somebody loses somebody all of a sudden, an accident or suicide? How do you give somebody the tools to be able to help them to kind of get through that? Maybe the first couple days, couple weeks, maybe they like to be around you and you have more access to them. How do you help them?
in that situation, I mean, even when it comes down to suicide, right? I've I've known people, right, throughout my career, and have dealt with different clients that they want to get better,
Mm-hmm.
right? They want to get better and seek help, but at the end of the day, I mean, it just it may not work out for them, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they might feel disillusioned with life and just and end up committing suicide. And whether it's been a coworker or whether it has been um, a loved one, it's whoever they leave behind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's just those stages of grief. And I have seen people go through anger, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
first, because it's kind of like, what, like, how could this have happened? What could I have done different? And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of blame,
Yeah, a lot
right?
of guilt, right?
They blame themselves, and um but it's just really, at that point, it is a lot about listening to them. Also, like, what I've learned is making sure that you listen, but you're also doing some of like motivational interviewing where you're making sure that you understand and comprehend. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you have never been in that situation yourself, I mean, you can't say, oh, I know what you're going through and I'm sorry. And you know what I mean? It's just
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes is more detrimental than
Yeah.
than being helpful, saying those things, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of it is really listening and hearing them out, and the experiences or the good times that they had with these people, right? And making sure that you validate.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important, is validating what they
Yes.
feel,
Mm-hmm.
because they feel that. um so for me, that would be one of the main things or big things, right, to
So
focus on.
validating and empathy play a big role.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, Mary Lou, believe it or not, time has already, it's already been 30 minutes. Believe it or not, that's
Oh
quick.
my gosh.
But we kind of know that these interviews sometimes, tend to flow so, good and interesting that all of a sudden we're just out of time. But we'd love to have you back on our show and to touch upon the subject a little more. But we have this thing on the Love Health Prosperity podcast that towards the end we always ask for you to give us some tips of encouragement. But before you do that, we would like for you to tell us a little bit about how we can get a hold of you and what your projects are right now.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. So I have actually opened up my own mental health clinic.
What's it called?
It is called Tranquil Minds Behavioral Health.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so excited to be able to do that. I know, there is such, even with the services that we do have in El Paso, there's still such a lack of services,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And with that being said, I mean, I am so grateful and blessed to be able to help our community, the El Paso community, right?
Yes.
And right
Something
now,
you've done pretty much your whole career.
Yes, yes. And you know what? And I've done it in different capacities, but to be able to have a little bit more of a say, right? And how that looks like, that means a lot to me. I really want to take a holistic approach, and have a lot of great ideas, that
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do we get a hold of Mary Lou? If we have any questions or if we want to look up the clinic.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, you can go onto my website, which is tranquilmindsbh.co. And I would say all our information is on there. So our, phone number, fax number, and just a little bit more about, who we are. So I would recommend you, or whoever is watching this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
go on to there. The other thing too is, and I think this is really important for me to say, is when I picked the logo,
Mm-hmm.
right, for Tranquil Minds, I picked a lotus.
Mm-hmm.
And the lotus is very significant. Like it has a lot of meaning, right? And a lotus blooms in something out of muddy
Mm-hmm.
waters, right? And
Yes.
sometimes life might feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
It might feel muddy. It might feel, like.
Rough around the edges. Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, that's why I picked the lotus, because there's always something beautiful that can bloom, right?
Yes.
Out of something bad, or a
Mm-hmm.
bad situation, or just feeling depressed, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wanted to emphasize on that, and how important that means.
That's cool.
That's really important to me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Now, last words of encouragement for those that are watching right now.
It's okay to ask for help. No one is, better than another person. I think that there still is stigma, right? For Mental Health Awareness Day, the theme was that it's a human right.
Mm-hmm.
Seeking help is a human right, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how we should all see it. We shouldn't judge. And I will advocate until I'm blue in the face, as far as not having that stigma for seeking help.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like anything else. If you seek help when you're physically
Mm-hmm.
sick, right? Why wouldn't you seek help with your mental?
Absolutely. 100% agree with you. Well, I want to thank you for being on our show and taking the time out of your busy schedule to hang
Thank
out with us today.
you.
So we're really grateful for that. And for those that are watching, we would like for you guys to, if you like what you're seeing, and if you're learning different topics, we'd like for you guys to support the channel. If possible, give us a like on social media, subscribe on YouTube, and if anything you want to be able to see as far as different topics, send us a DM, and we'll be more than happy to be able to present to you guys different topics that might interest you guys. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next week.